Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Films and Stuff podcast. I am Ethan, and I'm joined by my erstwhile partner, Pete, the P in MVP. Hey, Pete, what's up today?
Not much, buddy. How are you?
Good. We've got a bunch of kind of like random summer stuff to talk about. I wouldn't say this is going to be one of our patented rambles.
Yeah, I think the primary thing is let's focus on the fact that House of the Dragon season 2 ended, right? The finale.
Yeah.
And last night, at the time of this recording, Borderlands, the movie, dropped in cinemas. And we both saw that, and we both have thoughts.
We did. I mean, actually, to set up where Borderlands comes in, apart from Deadpool 3, the summer quote-unquote blockbuster season has left me wanting, shall we say, right? I mean, Deadpool 3 was fantastic. Borderlands, I guess, was one of the bigger things coming out. I mean, that's a very big brand. I mean, the video game broke all sorts of records, right, historically. And I think you're a huge video gamer, right? I mean, you played the game and you loved it.
I played all 3 Borderlands games. I've also played the spin-offs.
So were you excited about this movie?
I was not. I was not for a couple of reasons. So let's get into it. So Borderlands, the video game, for those who don't know, it's what's described as, at the most general and basic way of looking at it, it's a first-person looter shooter, which is kind of like an action RPG, but not really. It's more of an action game. Yeah. It's called a looter shooter because the whole premise and shtick behind Borderlands is it's comic book level violence, right? So there's lots of blood, guts, and gore. It's adolescent or pre-adolescent type of humor, right? Lots of dick jokes, fart jokes, lots of, immature humor. It's called a looter shooter because the premise of the game is that, you have obviously a storyline that you're going through, but you play the game multiple times because you keep wanting to get better and better weapons and better loot, which you get from killing enemies, and the higher level you are, the better weapons they drop and different weapons. And the whole point of the game is like, I think it was in the second game onwards, they were like, we have over 1 kajillion guns in the game because they had this tech, which was relatively revolutionary for that game, where each weapon was procedurally generated. So every weapon was unique. So if you and I played the game on 2 different systems, same level, same enemy, we would get different weapon drops because your ammo type would be different, your barrel would be different, your manufacturer would be different, and all the different specs would be different from the same enemy. Yeah. And that was the whole point, was that you kept playing it through and through and through until you got like these super fantastic weapons that suited your playstyle. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the video game. And admittedly, I really enjoyed the first 2 video games. The third was kind of boring, but still, it stuck to a formula. It did relatively well. In terms of IP, it's probably one of the most important IPs that Gearbox Studios, the video game company that owns it, has. The movie, however, did not translate any of that on screen. Maybe we've been spoiled, but I feel like video game adaptations and comic book adaptations over the last 10, 15 years have gotten really good. And I don't mean like they're fantastic movies, all the thing, but I'm saying compared to the video game movies and comic book movies we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s, they've gotten infinitely better, right? There's a nuanced plot, there's great effects, there's great acting, there's great villains, all of that. This had none of that.
Which is a good video game adaptation that you think is?
Well, The Last of Us that we saw on Max, I thought that was a fantastic video game adaptation.
Halo was terrible.
Halo was terrible. Look, Halo was terrible because the plot was terrible. But like, if you look at the quality of the effects, if you look at the quality of the action, if you look at the quality of the set design, that was fantastic. But the premise itself was flawed. But if you look outside of the quote unquote creative or, variable aspects of the Halo show, Halo was pretty good. It felt quite faithful to the video game outside of the plot. The plot wasn't nowhere near the level of the video games.
Yeah. There's also Fallout.
Oh, Fallout. Amazing. They translated the world exceptionally well. The acting was good. Set design was phenomenal. And the story, again, I think they did it absolutely right. They took an established universe and they said, listen, we're not going to mess around with the characters that people know and love. We're not going to mess around with the stories that people know and love, because that is a no-win situation. Gamers are always going to find something they're going to pick apart. So we'll build a story, we'll make a new story, we'll make a new vault that's brand new, and we'll set it in that. So either you copy the game perfectly, like Last of Us pretty much did, or you say, hey, we're going to take the setting and we'll make our own story and we'll make it faithful to the idea of the video games, which is what Fallout did.
I mean, Fallout was another series. Do you think it's easier to make a series than it is to make the movie?
The advantage of series is that you get more time. Not everything is an exposition dump, and you get to learn more about the world in an organic way. In a 2-hour movie, or in this case, in an 1.5-hour long movie, you have to explain the world of Pandora in 2 or 3 lines of dialogue.
You know what I found more than once on Borderlands? I heard the line usually by Cate Blanchett.
Yeah.
Where she said, what do you mean? Then that was like the setup for someone would just like dump a bunch of like background and explain the situation to the audience, right? Like, I'm special. And she'd say, what do you mean? Well, blah,
and
blah,
I don't
blah.
understand that, considering her whole point in this story was she was born there and she knows the planet. So she should know.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Even if she's not lived on the planet, she should know, because Pandora, at least in the video game, the first video game, and maybe even the second video game, is an important location, even though it is a dump. So even if you're off-world, you should know about it.
How long into the movie were you when you're like, oh my God, it's going to be a long afternoon?
So let me set this up for you. I saw it on an Insignia screen, which is like the premiere of premiere screens that you could watch it on anywhere.
Oh, fancy.
By circumstance, not out of choice. It was literally by circumstance. It was the only one that I could watch. I had to go to a cinema far away because only 3 or 4 cinemas in the city are showing it.
Oh.
So that's already strike one. I was just like, oh, that's a bit weird. Like, my local isn't showing it. And I went to a 7 p.m. showing. So this is like on a Friday night. This is like prime cinema going time, right? Because it's
opposite of what you did for Deadpool. Yeah.
Opposite of Deadpool. So at 7 o'clock, you're out by 9. You're just in time for a night out. You can go out for a nice dinner, and it's in a mall. There's lots of options. I was one of 2 people in the theater.
No way.
2 people. I thought I was going to be late to the movie, and the guy was like, you don't need to worry. We can hold the show for you. When I walked in 10 minutes late. They were still luckily doing, the trailers and advertisements.
Yeah.
I was the only one in, and then the second guy walked in maybe 5 minutes after me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was not, I guess maybe it just wasn't going to take off well from the get-go. I don't know. It didn't do anything for me.
Yeah. I never played the video games, but I knew of the IP, and you and I discussed it a little bit during our summer top 10 list.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think either of us put it on our top 10 list.
You did, I think.
Oh no. Did I really?
I'm pretty sure you did.
Oh my God. That's my Garfield. Did I really?
Hold on. Let me check, but I'm pretty sure you did.
Please have me at number 10. It might not make the summer 100. I've heard the box office numbers have been like humiliatingly bad.
Ethan, you had it at number 6.
Oh my God.
You had it as high as number 6.
That's my Garfield.
That's your Garfield movie.
Did you have it?
No, it's nowhere on my list. Not even as a wild card.
Yikes. I heard it made 1.3 million.
What?
It's been
That's it?
Yeah, it's been horrible. And the reviews have been not kind. The only positives have been kind of like those backhanded compliments, like, well, Kevin Hart plays a serious actor, or, you know, it's a new role for him or something like that. You know, the Tiny Tina, a solid newcomer. No one has praised the movie whatsoever.
So let's talk about that. So casting, I think, was totally wrong for this. Actually, you know what? Let's start all with the good. So
right.
What are some of the goods? One, the colors, set design. Some aspects of the set design and the world building, well, not the world building, but some of the worlds looked good, so some of the things translated on screen pretty well. The props look fantastic. I hated the character of Claptrap, but his visual effects, pretty good.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. Oh, I will say the sound effects were pretty good because they took some of the sound effects straight from the video game, so I recognized a lot of that. But everything else was pretty bad. I think the casting was all wrong. I don't think I've ever hid the fact that I'm in love with Cate Blanchett. And with all due respect to Cate Blanchett, she's way too old to be doing this role. First of all, she looked somehow older in her Lilith outfit than she does in real life. Like, I don't understand how they did that, but they made her look way older than she is. But everyone in this movie, especially compared to the video game, was too old. In the video game, Tannis is like in her 30s. Here you have her being played by like a 70-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis. That didn't make any sense to me. Lilith is supposed to be in her 20s. Roland is supposed to be in his 20s. Tina is supposed to be like 12.
Yeah.
So like, I don't understand why they did any of that. Yeah. And I think they would have been way better off casting 5 people who are relative unknowns rather than casting a big name. And then just trusting that the IP is good enough. A, it would have brought the cost down. And B, I think they were trying to make this like a Guardians of the Galaxy style movie with the explosions, with the action sequences, with the banter, but none of it landed.
It wasn't quirky enough. It wasn't funny enough. I have to say, like, even if it was, I mean, video game adaptations are tough, but even if you're faithful and you get the plot and the characters right, it just didn't land either by being funny or witty or even being like kind of like gross and faithful to the video game, right?
Yeah.
It was very down the middle. I just didn't hear or see anything that I thought was interesting at all. It was really hard to keep my attention on it.
Nothing exceptional at all.
So I think we both consider this a skip, huh?
I mean, look, it's just terrible. The plot was all wrong. I mean, we didn't even touch upon it, but like the plot felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The vibe felt off. It didn't translate the aspects of the game that made the game famous. And fair enough. I mean, most video games don't have an amazing plot, but this one was exceptionally not amazing. Not just down the line, but like down the line bad almost.
This movie did have a lot of challenges, right? I read it was kind of like filmed during COVID.
Oh yeah.
And then they had to have some reshoots with a different director because the original director had some other commitments. He did Thanksgiving. So I think this was also a casualty of circumstance as well.
I think what happened is that Randy Pitchford, who's like the head of Gearbox Studios, he's known for being a bit of a blowhard and a jackass. And he's also known in the video game industry for kind of being like this guy who thinks he's a bit larger than life, big ego, that sort of thing. I think he basically said, I have an IP that I want to make a movie out of. I want to get all these big players in. And if no one else is going to fund it, my studio will.
Oof.
I think it was just caught in the circumstance of ego and a lot of sanity checks, which Hollywood famously doesn't have sanity checks as it is.
Nope.
And you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, right? Like we always,
Yeah.
the one thing that I think we've always said is that you and I should be like their chief common sense officers.
Yeah.
They didn't just not have that. I think they were just like, we don't even want to think about that because we're basically getting funded by this moron who thinks he's got a winner here. So let's just take advantage of the fact that we can kind of milk all this money out of him.
If you're going to pay for it, it's your problem.
Yeah, it's your thing to deal with. So much so that the second writer in the film took his name off the script and created an alter ego. We don't know who the second writer in the movie is, but he said this is such a
dumpster fire
that I'm going to just give a pseudonym and I'm going to take my name off and I don't want anyone to know who I am.
What if I'd come to you and be like, hey, Pete, instead of films and stuff with Ethan, can you just refer to me as Ernie for this episode? Like, wouldn't that be like a huge red flag if someone's like, I don't want to use my real name. So
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, exactly. You don't even need a chief common sense officer for that. You just need anyone with two brain cells rubbing together to be like, wait a minute. Hollywood is famously all about egos, and this guy doesn't want his name on what could potentially be a summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
Red flag, right?
Yeah. All right, so that's Borderlands. We both give it a skip, yeah?
Oh my God. It's an affront to movies this summer. In a summer which already has a low in blockbusters, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This is like lower than low.
Speaking of which, we should definitely talk about the J-Lo Affleck meltdown.
Is it happening? What's going on with that?
So the most recent thing I heard, and this has blown my mind, is apparently Suge Knight weighed in.
What, the murderer?
This is going to make us both embarrassed. He has a podcast from prison called Collect Calls with Suge Knight, and he just records it through Collect Calls from prison. But he dropped a bombshell, which has zero verification. But his bombshell was that
he hooked up with Jennifer Lopez? Don't tell me.
No, even weirder. In the FBI raid of P. Diddy's place, apparently P. Diddy had all these crazy X-rated videos of J-Lo, and somehow Affleck saw them, and he got like super pissed off and jealous. Suge Knight dropped it on his prison podcast.
How is Suge Knight from jail more well-informed than Pete and Ethan? This is annoying on multiple levels.
That's why I said, like, you're going to get angry, man. This guy's got a very popular podcast. That was something that dropped, but it seems like these two are absolutely getting divorced, right? It just seems like they're just sorting out their affairs.
Celebrity couples. I have zero faith in them. And when I see a good one, it's 1 in a million, literally.
All right, that's that. Now, shall we get to House of the Dragon season finale? So season 2 is in the books.
First of all, can I just say, how are they going to do 2 more seasons of this? Because I'm already tired. And I'm not in a bad way, by the way. I get tired by the end of these seasons because there's just so much going on and there's like, where's this going to go? But 2 more seasons of this? Like, they just confirmed that. They've already greenlit season 3 and 4, and 4 is supposed to be the finale.
I thought it was originally supposed to be 5, so maybe they've already cut a season off.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, Game of Thrones was 8.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that last season was just so miserable. But for 7 seasons, the pacing was very good.
Yeah.
Right? They introduced us to everybody. There were multiple plots. We knew the big thing, right, with the White Walkers, winter's coming. That was paced great until we got to like end of season 7, beginning of season 8. We never kind of got to like, hey, well, where's the payoff?
Yeah.
House of the Dragon, I felt, has just started all wrong. Like, we complained about it season 1, right? I mean, the pacing was all wrong. And season 2 has kind of like just emphasized this, where it went too fast. I would argue that they should have taken season 1 and made that 2 seasons, and they should have taken season 2 and made that 2 seasons, and there should be 1 season to follow, and they could have got 5. But I think they really, really went too fast in season 1. They expedited things, and that just kind of like set everything off. And I was not opposed to them taking their time and us getting to to know all the characters. And it's been really weird where Matt Smith has been Matt Smith since the first episode of season 1, whereas Rhaenyra, I mean, she's had different actresses.
Yeah, because they played her in 2 different growth stages, I guess.
Yeah, the same with Alicent, right? So, I mean, it's been really weird that they haven't been consistent. Matt Smith has stayed the same, whereas Alicent and Rhaenyra have, shown the growth between being precocious young kids and then kind of like the adults that they are now.
Yeah.
Did you read the books? I'm sure you have.
I didn't read the prequels that House of Dragons is based on,
but
I did read all 7 of the
Ice and Fire. Yeah. The problem I have with the show is that I just don't have anybody that I'm cheering for or against. Game of Thrones, I had a opinion about everybody. There were good guys, there were bad guys, there were people that you liked or didn't like. Here, I don't have any allegiances. I just kind of am either lethargic or dislike everybody. I feel like everybody is a bad decision maker. There's no one that I really am cheering for at all. And I think that's the problem with this show.
I think the other problem with this show, and this could be my problem, but they're making inferences rather than showing things. Whereas Game of Thrones was really good about showing things as well. The big quote unquote reveal that Helena knows that Aemond burned Aegon.
Yeah.
They didn't really show that in that big battle sequence. Whereas I think Game of Thrones, they would not have shied away with showing that level of betrayal. They did that with Littlefinger. They did that with Jaime Lannister throwing Bran out of the tower in the first episode. They didn't do any of that. That's fine if you don't show it, as long as the implication is made very clear. Here it wasn't. Remember at the end of that episode, you just see him kind of put his sword away.
Yeah.
And you and I both had the discussion about was he killing him or was he about to kill him?
Yeah.
Those are great twists if you get to see what actually happened, but they didn't do that.
The problem, I think, is that these things are so sudden.
Yeah.
Right? There's no subtlety. I mean, to be honest, Aegon and Aemond, they actually weren't really beefing that much. And in some ways, they seem to be kind of supportive. If you would have seen this long simmering 2-year battle between the immature older king's son.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the scene where Aemond, spoke very, very good Valyrian. We know that he's a better fighter. He's a person who lost his eye and probably has a little bit of, anger, because, he wasn't treated fairly. If you would have seen this long simmering brew, it would have justified some of this, but it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere.
I think only in 3 or 4 episodes it happened really quick, right? Basically starting from that episode where he gets not caught, but he gets seen by Aegon in the brothel.
Yeah.
And I think basically from there's 3 episodes. So you're right. There was no simmering beef. Tyrion had simmering beef with everyone.
Yeah.
Especially with his father.
Yeah.
Over multiple seasons.
Yes. You saw the level of disrespect. You saw the resentment, the anger. Yes, I mean, those were brewing things. Here, again, this should have been a season-long thing where that relationship is becoming more and more frayed, and it leads to this, right? And even strategically, by the way, it was a very stupid move. It's one thing to take down a king, but to be honest, when you take down a king and a dragon, you're basically weakening your own empire that you're going to assume control of.
Yeah. Although you may not see it that way, but yes.
The other thing that I thought went too fast was the Matt Smith. How many episodes at Harrenhal did we have where we kind of thought that he was going to stake his own claim to the throne?
That's right. That's exactly right. Because that was exactly what you call. I was about to say the same thing because you called it out maybe, I don't know, however many weeks ago when we first spoke about this, where you saw it coming and I didn't, because you thought there were going to be 3 factions, right? You thought there was going to be the King's Landing faction, Rhaenyra, and Matt Smith was going to be the 3rd.
Yes.
And all of them had different rights based on their bloodline. Yes. In fact, there are 3 factions, but it went a different way, right? Now we have Aemon versus Aegon versus Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra has now basically secured Matt Smith.
Yeah. But it was, I don't know. It was really, I didn't like the storytelling because she's right. I mean, up until like the last minute of that show, everyone is trying to get us to be convinced that he's going to start on his own, right?
Yeah,
Rhaenyra
including
flies
his
there.
hand guy who's just like, we need a king, not a queen.
And then he goes, and after not speaking and he being weird for so many episodes, then he like pledges his love and devotion and, oh, you're the only queen and I will support you. And it was a letdown. After so much like misdirection, it was really a letdown to be like, okay, so now they're back. Now their marriage is stronger than ever. He's totally supportive after all that.
I would have bought it if it wasn't more than just the dreams, right? Because he was having all these nightmares and visions that she was the one sitting on the throne, not him, and all, or whatever it was, and that he was going to drown in dragon blood or whatever it was going to be, right? Whatever that's the case, not enough. If there was one conflict which kind of confirmed that Rhaenyra was going to do all that and that the visions were coming true.
Yeah.
And then he had to buckle because he was like, wait, I've seen these visions in my sleep. I've had nightmares for the last like 6 months here at Harrenhal on my own. Rhaenyra shows up and all of a sudden these omens start coming true. I better bend the knee. That I would have bought. But this thing where she kind of shows up, she speaks to him for half an hour, and then all of a sudden he bends the knee in front of everyone. You're right. It's a bit too matter of the fact and too quick.
Again, neither one of us read the prequels, but I'm just assuming because we know where Game of Thrones picks up, the Blacks have to lose, right? If you look forward 2 years, we can't have the Blacks win. And then there's like well, this is how it ended. Now we're not going to tell you what happened in the next 100 years, but obviously, you know, all the Targaryens have somehow lost between now and then. They have to lose. I mean, you would think that Daemon would kind of choose against his visions, right? Like there's all these visions like, hey, if you don't support Rhaenyra, this is what will happen. You have to support her. And he like ignores all his visions. And you can see, like, as a result of him ignoring his visions, this is where it all stemmed from. The Blacks ultimately lost because, you know, he went out on his own. They weren't unified. As a result, the Targaryen dynasty was defeated and so on and so forth, you know, continuing on with Game of Thrones. But it seems really strange that he's kind of doing what he should be doing and still we know what the outcome is. It's not consistent. I'm really not clear how, I mean, if we didn't know where the story ended, I would say that the Blacks, right, the Targaryens, have a clear advantage now. Not only is Daemon reunited with Rhaenyra, Aemond is kind of the only legitimate dragon rider. It seems like Daemon's daughter now is going to take a sheep stealer.
Yeah.
They've got these 3 idiots that now can ride dragons, which isn't, I think, consistent at all with what we've been taught about dragons.
Yeah, exactly.
I can maybe understand Adam, kind of him getting one because he is, you know, related to the sea snake. But the other 2 dudes dislike them greatly.
Hugely.
And it was telegraphed, obviously, for a whole season that these 2 would somehow be important, right?
Yeah.
So how do the Blacks possibly lose this?
Betrayal?
Betrayal? Yeah, maybe. Maybe Jacaerys, who obviously is not happy with the 2 common folk, the dragon seed.
Yeah.
It just seems impossible that they can lose now. They have a dramatically bigger army. You know what's going to happen somehow, and this is your point earlier. Helena somehow has...
That's the question I wanted to ask you because I think I might have missed it, but maybe I didn't. So what is this thing that now she's got visions? Or she's like the new 3-eyed raven?
Yeah, I feel like they've been doing this very, very badly, where they've been leaking that she is somehow important. They've been doing this for, I think it's only been the 2nd season. They've been leaking that she's been somehow really important. And like, she comes across as this very reserved, doesn't want to get involved, just wants to be by herself, insulated girl. But then you see these few references where it's just like punching you in the face, like, oh, she's something more than that.
Yeah.
So somehow she is going to be either the 3-eyed raven or she's got some type of mysterious power. But it seems absolutely clear that she is going to be a very consequential character and somehow more powerful than anyone else.
Yeah, but again, that's not earned. Like
No.
the thing about Bran, as much as I dislike the character, I loved that they spent literally seasons showing him traveling past the wall to figure out and to search out the three-eyed raven because he felt like there was some connection there with Hodor, with all of these guys, losing people along the way, but he couldn't give a damn because he was like, hey, this is bigger than all of us. And I don't care that I'm, crippled and I can't walk. I'm going to get there. I'm going to become a part of the tree. I'm going to become the new three-eyed raven. And then it pays off in the last season. Again, as bad as the last season was, at least that payoff made sense.
Yeah.
Here, I either missed it big time, but like, I don't understand where she's getting these visions and how she understands exactly what's going on. And she's able to have that confrontation with Aemond on the balcony where I was convinced that he was going to throw her off. She calls him out and says, I know you did these things. I saw you do these things. How?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
We didn't even see you get a visit from the three-eyed raven. We don't know any of that stuff.
I agree. You should start this early, which is when you show her being born. You show that, her childbirth was very unusual.
And maybe there's even just a flock of ravens there, right?
Yes. Right. Or you show her as a kid and she's always been kind of like had this connection to ravens, or like you could nurture this storyline for a long time where people are meant to be like, wow, this is a wild card. It looks very bad for the Greens right now. They're very fragmented, but this is the wild card who's a secret weapon that no one knows about, right?
Yeah.
She's got premonitions. She's got visions. She's got some superpowers. Like maybe she can like control dragons with her thoughts or something. Like you could really make this an ongoing storyline where people know that she's like the secret weapon in waiting. And she's just ready for like, what is the right catalyst event that causes her to kind of like strike and get involved in the thick of this war.
Or she just becomes an independent player, kind of like how Bran was for a majority. Of course, he sides with the Starks because he is a Stark. But at least initially for the 6 odd seasons that he was a player, he was just on his own. He wasn't really a Stark. He was just Bran.
I want to love House of the Dragon because for me, the House of the Dragon story is more compelling than the Game of Thrones story. The Game of Thrones story is all leading up to the White Walkers, right?
Yeah.
And the wall and winter is coming. That's, I don't know, very apocalyptical. And I didn't really like the White Walkers. I just thought it was not great, even though I loved the series itself. This, I think, is better where you're saying, hey, there used to be a dynasty. There was peace. Then, because of the fact that Viserys was a weak leader and he didn't really have great choices, because of those two circumstances, you see how delicate the transfer, the balance of power is. He maybe made the wrong choice, but he also had some, complicating factors. Daemon being a bad guy, Rhaenyra being kind of a brat and not really taking charge, him having kids at a very, very late age who were young, but had, blonde hair that kind of like continued the line of succession. Those 3 factors caused him to kind of make a bad decision. That bad decision has led to unrest, infighting, and ultimately this is going to lead to the downturn. I think it's a more compelling story. I just think that the pacing has been wrong. I think visually everything is the same as, I'm happy with it. I like the acting. I like the characters, but I don't know who is the good guy that I should be cheering for. And I kind of dislike everybody. And that's what's disappointing, is that I want a hero, even if the hero that I want, I know is going to lose. I want it to be very clear who I should be rooting for in this. No one can be cheering for Daemon. Daemon's supposed to be the heel, right? He is a bad guy. He is genuinely a jerk, right? And I wish they would just like lean into that. He could be the Jaime Lannister who's swarmy and very talented and definitely the best fighter, but like a jerk, even though Jaime Lannister redeemed himself at the end, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be great for him to just lean into that role and be bad all the time. And he was kind of like season 1, right? You saw he was really, really bad guy season 1. I don't feel any passion for Rhaenyra at all. He did not step up and take control over, her birthright. She could have been much more involved. She was like the most technically proficient. She was the most studious. She was, the most engaged. She built up, all these loyalties and things, but she was passed over because she was a woman. Then you'd feel a little bit more sympathetic for her. But remember, for years and years and years as a kid, she was a very bad ruler in waiting. She never took a husband. She never wanted to be involved in events. She was always like so bratty about things that you can't really feel like, oh, now, we should support her when she wants to be queen. Like she's minimized this role for, her whole life. She never took control of it. She was even named ruler in waiting. Did she double her studies? Did she try to forge all these relationships? Did she try to learn about anything? You never really felt like she embraced the role. She just said she wanted it, but she didn't take any action to want it. Okay. Then you've got Alicent's kids, right? I mean, maybe they should be the heels, where you should dislike both of those, and those two, dislike each other. One is, definitely smarter, stronger, but he's the younger one. The older one, who's entitled to everything, is a little bit of a playboy, a jerk. He's the King Joffrey. So, I mean, you could have this dynamic as well. And then you've got Helena, who's the Bran, like you said, the three-eyed raven, who's clearly the most powerful. They didn't really set this up so that you've got a team that you're cheering for or that you're cheering against or that you think deserves to be in the role. Everyone's got their own kind of like issues. So I love it. I'm not going to stop watching it. I'm picking a little bit here, but like, it's not a timeless classic. It could have been made, I think, a little bit better.
That I agree with.
From a story perspective.
100%. I think, again, the caveat to that statement is that neither of us have read the books. So, how much are they being faithful? How much are they changing things around? We can't tell you that. But at least on a basic storytelling level, things aren't adding up. Or even if they are, they're not adding up in a satisfactory way.
Yeah. Okay. So that is House of the Dragon.
What do you rate the season?
It's a mooch.
Yeah, I think this is a mooch as well.
I think by the true definition of mooch, where, if you're limited to the streaming platforms that you have, if, watching episodes exactly the day that they come out is not your priority, this is where you call your brother or friend or someone and be like, hey, do you mind if I borrow your, HBO password? I want to watch, the latest episode, or I'm a few episodes behind, right?
Yeah.
It's not I've got to pay for it. I've got to see these when they come out. If you're a huge Game of Thrones fan, like, okay, maybe, but you're definitely not missing anything.
Agreed. So House of the Dragon season 2's in the books. It's a mooch from both of us.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see how the next season goes whenever the next season comes out.
So, Pete, please give our Films and Stuff YouTube jazz where people can write to us, agree, disagree, agree to disagree, put comments, ring the bell, so on and so forth.
Reach out to us. Let us know what you think of the finale of House of the Dragon season 2. Let us know what you thought of Borderlands. If you've got any juicy scoops on Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, I mean, if Suge Knight does, maybe you do too. Tweet at us at FNS Podcast. DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. But the easiest thing you can do is drop a comment below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell.
All right, Pete, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you very much. We will see you next week on our next episode of the Films and Stuff Podcast. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.